The Purchase Orders module of Evolution MX allows for the raising of material purchase orders. Through the submenu, we can see we've got the ability here to browse to the required option. So entering a new purchase order can be done from the menu. Primarily, it's going to ask you for which contract the purchase order is to be raised against. If you have the stock module, that would alternatively allow you to raise a purchase order for a store or a location that will bring it into stock and allow it to be later issued for contract. With the contract option, we're able to browse on the particular job that we want to raise a purchase order against. So full searching is available at this point. Select the job that you require and then use the auto option to automatically allocate the next purchase order number. Now you can see here it's used a centrally allocated number of 157, and I've asked it in the setup to prefix that purchase order number with an indication of the contract number and also MA to indicate that it is a materials purchase order. Okay, that would allow for clear identification on any incoming paperwork that's quoting that number, clear to indicate that what kind of order it is and what contract it's against. We can also impose buyer limits if we want to. So I could have a threshold of say £500, which is okay for me to raise purchase orders. If I go above that, then it would seek authorization before the purchase order be confirmed. You can record in note form who's asked you maybe to raise the purchase order if you're operating central buying and you need to keep a record as to who's made you the request for the purchase order. We can then select the supplier that we want to raise a purchase order against. Now that allows us to have full searching capabilities here against all of our supplier records, searching on any field of data that you might choose to use, including the user-defined fields which are available. So let's select our Wolseley account. Now Wolseley may be set up with a number of different points of contact. I've here on the drop-down list got different branches that are available to have purchase orders raised against. This could be different departments at the same site. It could even be different people. Each of these different, what we call alternative addresses, has been set with an email contact. So that means that when you are choosing to send the purchase order via email, it will go to the respective recipient. Over here, we're saying, yes, do send this by email, and also have the option for CCing this into, for example, the site manager or the QS or any other party that might be interested in the purchase order. We can enter notes to the top and bottom of the purchase order if we want to. That could either be free format notes, they could be copied and pasted, or you could choose for the library of different paragraphs to be available, where you may be sometimes wanting to say certain information on a purchase order, but not necessarily always. If you have some specific site instructions that are relevant, then these can be set against the contract and then appear automatically as delivery instructions on that site. So for example, any notable access restrictions near a school or a low bridge or whatever it might be can be automatically included on the purchase order. We can also include terms and conditions as an additional document. So without you having to remember to always include the terms and conditions, we can just set an always attach rule so that when this purchase order is emailed out, it can be accompanied by the relevant terms and conditions. That means that you can then freely monitor and maintain the content of that terms and conditions without us having to get involved. You can also use the document button at the bottom there, which will allow you to drag and drop any other documents that you want. So maybe a site plan or a copy of the supplier's quote, for example, can easily be incorporated as an additional file to either just be stored against the purchase order or maybe to also be sent out with the purchase order via email. Now, building up the content of the purchase order is achieved through the use of either the product button and or the price book button at the bottom of the screen. The reason we've got two is because the product button would allow you to access the full product library, and that could run into hundreds if not thousands of different items, and they're not necessarily all going to be relevant to be purchased from, in this case, Wolseley. So the price book allows you to go into a more filtered view of the products where you've got a buying relationship set for buying from Wolseley, either because you've bought from them before or maybe because you've imported the product and price list from Wolseley. And we can freely do that, or you can do that as frequently as you wish to, either to get you started in the first place, but also as a price refresh as prices change on 1st of January or whatever it may be. So I here have got a subset, if you like, of my product file, a dozen or so records that I've got a buying history with from Wolseley. And I can select any one of those to be included now within the purchase order. So just by highlighting and selecting, I get the standard description being shown that I could now amend for the purpose of this purchase order. And I'm just now being asked to confirm the quantities and the prices for this relevant purchase order. The price is going to be remembered, perhaps because you've imported the price list from the supplier, or maybe because you've updated the price on its last use. If I do now choose to make a change to the price, observe the tick box at the bottom. By having update price ticked, that means that that now becomes the next price to be suggested. So it's updating your price book entry for that particular product. If you untick the entry, then it'll allow you to use the 60 on this occasion, but it'll revert back to 50 as a suggestion next time. Using the product button towards the bottom will allow you to return to the product list and select any number of other alternatives to be added to the purchase order. So again, just confirming the quantity and the price. You are still able to revert back to the full product library. So if you find something that's needing to be purchased that isn't on that product list for the supplier, close out of there and revert back to the product, where you can select any product codes that you may have, or entertain the option of using a search. So you could search by category, maybe because you're looking at electrical products or window products or timber products, whatever it may be, or maybe because you just know what you're looking for, you're not sure what its code is. So you can include a wildcard search there to be able to look for something that in this case contains the word gang. That will then find the items and allow you to be able to select that. So that's doing the same thing as the price book entry. It's just allowing you to search through any number of different products that are on file. You may also want to use the option for sundry products. Now, every line of a purchase order requires there to be a product of some sort, but we're not necessarily saying you have to have a product code set up for everything you buy, because it may be something that is so bespoke or unique to this occasion that you don't want to set it up as a product. Or maybe it's just generic in nature. So what we suggest you do there is, so that the coding is going to be recognized correctly for onward posting with inside Evolution MX, that you have a number of sundry codes, in this case sundry aggregates, which allows me to enter the specific details of the particular product and the pricing, but it already knows, because of the setup, that that's going to go to my aggregates cost head on the contract. Okay? And you can use codes like that without having to overinflate the number of records that you've got within your product file. Now, at this point, you might choose to preview the purchase order, and that will allow you to see the content of the purchase order. This is purely an example of our standard offering for a purchase order form. It can easily be tailored so that, for example, top left-hand corner, we can add your company logo, but we can also fine-tune it for any specific requirements you've got, the terminology and content. So as a preview, it's just letting you see what it's going to look like. At this point, if I hit print, that is going to actually tell it to email. It's allowing me to do that because it's just checking on that threshold. So I am below the £500 threshold that I'd set, so I'm allowed to continue with this. And as I print, that will confirm and update the purchase order. So purchase order 157 will now be updated against the job. It will perform a committed cost update as well. So rather than affect the actual cost at this point, it will give you an indication of a committed cost against that particular contract. And it will store also a copy of that purchase order for you. So if you wanted to have a look at the job that purchase order was just raised against, we could call it up here through contract inquiry, specify the job number. As I say, no effect so far on the actual costs you've got at that point, but if you were to use the total option in the center there, we're now seeing the total value of outstanding purchase orders. So in the case of materials, we've got another £3 worth to be added to the actual cost of 10.5, meaning looking forward, we're looking at 13,700's worth of total committed spend on that contract. And we can see those purchase order details in full using the orders button towards the bottom. If I click on the orders, we'll now be able to see a summary listing of all the purchase orders and their current status against that particular job. There's the one I just raised for you a few minutes ago. If we double click, we'll be able to see the content of the lines and the status of those, what's been received, if anything, at that point, but also the document button will allow you to retrieve an image of the purchase order. In this case, it's just the single purchase order that was sent out to the supplier, but it could have included additional documentation if you'd added in the supplier quote, for example, or a site map. So you've got visibility then of the purchase order. It's then your choice as to what happens next in that process. It may be that you choose to do a goods received process, although that's not mandatory by any means. That is available to you within the purchase ordering of doing a goods received. But it may just be that you're going to match directly to a purchase invoice. So you could use the invoice register, for example, to pick up on the details of that purchase order for suggested matching at the invoice stage. We'll be looking at either of those options, the goods received note and the invoice register, as the subject of further webinars. But that was an introduction to you for the purchase ordering for materials purposes with inside Evolution MX. Thanks for listening.